On December 24, 1999, Indian Airlines Flight IC-814 from Kathmandu to Delhi was suddenly hijacked. The first question was, why Kathmandu? Nepal shares borders with both India and China, and crossing these borders isn't particularly difficult. That's why Kathmandu has always been a hotspot for spy agencies worldwide, including those from Pakistan, the USA, China, and India. These were the reasons why the hijackers chose Kathmandu for their operation. The next big questions were, who hijacked the plane and why? Along with figuring this out, there was the critical task of protecting the innocent passengers. This was a highly complex situation that dragged on for 7 days. What exactly happened during those 7 days? Let's find out in this special video. The hijacking incident. The Indian Airlines Flight IC-814 took off from Kathmandu, heading to Delhi, a journey that typically takes about 2 hours. However, the passengers and crew on this flight were unaware that the journey to Delhi would be much longer. 5 people hijacked the plane, and the hijackers demanded $200 million from the Indian government for the release of the passengers, along with other major demands, including the release of some dangerous terrorists from jail. For the next 7 days, the entire nation watched the chaos unfold on television, witnessing the largest and last hijacking in India's history. Yes, you heard that right. This was the last plane hijacking in India, as no plane has been hijacked since.
काठमांडू से दिल्ली आ रहे इंडियन एयरलाइंस के विमान का आज अपहरण कर लिया गया है।
Plane was carrying 11 crew members and 179 passengers.
We have evidence to show that hijackers were encouraged by Pakistan.
Flight IC-814 takes off. Shortly after takeoff from Kathmandu, the passengers were served food. And while they were eating, 4 masked men suddenly stood up, snatched away the food, and announced that the plane had been hijacked. The hijackers quickly broke into the pilot's cabin and held Captain Devi Sharan at gunpoint, instructing him to keep flying west. The hijackers intended to take the plane to Pakistan. As the plane headed towards Lahore, Pakistan's air traffic control refused it permission to land. Meanwhile, in India, the air traffic control received news of the hijacking. The response and the initial complications. Interestingly, the then Prime Minister of India, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and his principal secretary, Brajesh Mishra, were informed about the hijacking nearly an hour later. At 6:04 p.m., Indian Air Traffic Control tried to contact Flight IC-814. Captain Devi Sharan informed them that the plane was running low on fuel and that they had been denied permission to land in Lahore. The captain requested the Indian Air Traffic Control to persuade the Pakistani authorities to allow them to land, as the hijackers were becoming increasingly frustrated and threatening to kill passengers if they were not allowed to land in Pakistan. At 6:30 p.m., the Indian High Commission in Pakistan requested permission for the plane to land in Lahore, but permission was still not granted. The landing in Amritsar. Meanwhile, Captain Devi Sharan tried to negotiate with the hijackers, explaining that the plane had very little fuel left and could not keep waiting for permission. The hijackers agreed to let the plane land in Amritsar for refueling. At 6:44 p.m., the flight began its descent towards Amritsar. This was something the hijackers absolutely did not want, as landing the plane in India would give the Indian government and authorities a significant advantage in this crisis situation. The Indian forces might have been able to control the situation more easily since the plane was about to land in India. However, what happened next was a historic blunder. Amritsar, a critical misstep. The flight landed at Amritsar Airport at 7:01 p.m., and an immediate request was made for refueling. Shockingly, Punjab's Director General of Police, Sarbjit Singh, only learned about the hijacking an hour earlier, around 6 p.m., and not through official channels, but by watching TV news. This incident highlighted a massive communication failure. Such an important person learned about the hijacking from television. A crisis management group was formed, and a local committee was set up with the purpose of delaying the plane as much as possible, giving commandos more time to develop a strategy and conduct ground operations. However, the hijackers refused to communicate with the local police officials and wanted to speak only with the officials in Delhi, and no resolution was reached from this communication. Threats escalate. Captain Devi Sharan requested again to refuel the plane as the hijackers were threatening to start killing passengers. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15, and still no refueling was done. The hijackers eventually attacked a passenger. Captain Sharan made another urgent request for refueling, and 40 minutes passed without action. The crisis management group devised a plan, ordering the Punjab police to hide some officers inside the fuel tanker and sneak them near the plane to puncture the tires, preventing it from taking off again. However, the air traffic control had another plan to place a fuel tanker in front of the plane to block its path. A failed blocking attempt. A fuel tanker started moving towards the plane, but the driver sped up, causing the air traffic control to worry that the hijackers might think something suspicious was happening. They instructed the driver to slow down, but due to miscommunication, the driver stopped the tanker abruptly. The hijackers and Captain Sharan saw this from the cockpit, which made the hijackers suspicious. Frustrated, the hijackers decided not to refuel and ordered the captain to take off immediately, ignoring the tanker in front of the plane. Under pressure, Captain Sharan prepared for takeoff and narrowly avoided hitting the fuel tanker on the runway. The plane took off again at exactly 7:49 p.m., the same time NSG commandos arrived at the airport. The operation completely backfired, leaving the commandos without an opportunity to take action. Crucially, the plane had still not been refueled. As the plane took off, Captain Devi Sharan sent a message to the air traffic control saying, "We are all dying." From Amritsar, Lahore was just 50 kilometers away, and the flight turned towards Pakistan once again. However, Pakistani air traffic control once again denied permission for the plane to land. They feared the hijackers would force the pilot to land in Lahore. To prevent this, all lights and navigation aids at the Lahore airport were turned off, making it extremely difficult for the plane to land. Despite this, Captain Sharan, under extreme pressure from the hijackers, insisted on landing anywhere possible. The flight descended gradually, and Captain Sharan realized they were about to crash land on a highway. He made one final request to the Pakistani air traffic control, warning that they would crash land on a highway if not allowed to land at the airport. Landing in Lahore. Hearing this, the Lahore air traffic control finally agreed, and the plane landed at Lahore airport. At 8:07 p.m., India requested the Pakistani airport officials to not let the plane take off again. India's plan was to send the Indian High Commissioner in Islamabad, G. Parthasarathi, to negotiate with the hijackers. At the airport in Pakistan, the plane was finally refueled. To prevent another takeoff, the airport lights were turned off again, and commandos surrounded the plane. There were attempts by the Pakistani forces to negotiate with the hijackers, asking them to release the women and children, but these negotiations failed. Frustrated by the lack of progress and their unmet demands, the hijackers attacked another passenger, Rupin Katyal, a 25-year-old man from Gurgaon who was returning from his honeymoon with his wife. Rupin later died from his injuries. The next movements. The hijackers next attempted to fly the plane to Oman, but were denied permission to land. The plane's next landing was at Dubai's Al Minhad Air Base around 3 a.m. After tough negotiations, the hijackers finally released 26 passengers. An Indian Airlines relief aircraft was sent to Dubai to bring these passengers back to India. The returning passengers provided crucial information about the hijacking. They revealed that there were 5 hijackers who had assumed various aliases, with their leader calling himself Chief, and others named Burger, Doctor, Shankar, and Bola. However, their real names were later discovered: Ibrahim Akhtar, Shahid Akhtar Saeed, Sunny Ahmed Kazi, Zahur Mistry, and Shakir. Conditions for the remaining passengers deteriorated significantly, with a shortage of food and water and poor toilet conditions. The plane took off again, this time heading toward Afghanistan. On the morning of December 26, the plane landed at Kandahar International Airport. After landing, the Taliban authorities offered to mediate between the hijackers and India. Yes, you heard that right. The Taliban offered to mediate, as Afghanistan was under Taliban rule at the time. However, India did not recognize the Taliban government, so an official from the Indian High Commission in Islamabad was sent to Kandahar to negotiate. The passengers remained on the plane for 6 more days, with no idea of their fate, fearing for their lives as the Taliban had surrounded the plane with armed men. Suspicions and negotiations. There were suspicions regarding the true intentions of the Taliban, as the Indian government feared that the Taliban might be preventing any potential military operations against the hijackers. Ajit Doval, who was part of the special team sent to negotiate with the terrorists, mentioned that the hijackers were receiving active support from the ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence of Pakistan, assuring them of a safe exit. Meanwhile, on the other side, the hijackers released the passengers in the plane. At this point in time, the Indian team had expected that the hijackers would now be arrested by the Taliban. However, that does not happen. The Taliban's supreme leader, along with another Taliban member, takes the hijackers and the released terrorists in a vehicle and heads towards the border, Pakistan's border. At this point, it became very clear to India how Pakistan was involved in this hijacking. Harkat-ul-Mujahideen, a Pakistan-based militant group active in Poké, was behind this, and of the 36 prisoners whose release was demanded, 33 were Pakistani nationals. The hijackers safely crossed the border into Pakistan. On the other hand, the passengers breathe a sigh of relief. Many passengers are injured and hurt, and most of them are extremely hungry. On December 31st, they return home. The plane that was hijacked is retired in 2001 because it was already 20 years old. The blame for this entire incident obviously falls on the hijackers and their supporting stakeholders, whether it be the Taliban or Pakistani forces. However, the government at that time also faced criticism for how poorly it dealt with this crisis. When the plane was in Amritsar, the Indian forces had a golden opportunity to regain control of the plane. But due to major blunders by the government, which can be attributed to communication gaps, that opportunity was lost. As a result of these blunders, the Jaish-e-Mohammed group was later formed, and we witnessed many other attacks. I hope you found today's video informative. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel.